What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another After Action Report. My name is Joshua Joshi Howard, and today we're going to be talking about the Get Hammer WAAAAGH weekend that I went to over this last weekend. To be entirely honest with you guys, my executive dysfunction is going absolutely crazy tonight, so hopefully I get this all done and it'll be up by Tuesday. That's the goal. Before I start talking about the actual event, let's go ahead and start talking about some of the content plans I have coming up. As I've told a lot of people already, general things I'm looking to do is after the Codex box comes out on the 25th, I'm planning to do a roundtable on each detachment, just like we did with Bridgehead, where we had Nemo, David Purcell, and Clifton come on to talk about Bridgehead. I'm planning to do similar videos for every single one of the detachments. So I'm going to be planning to do that, as well as do unit guides, officer training schools on some of the new stuff as it comes out. I'm personally going to be playing a lot of mechanized. I'm really interested in playing some of the siege just to see how it works out, and I'll get back to you guys on what I generally think is strong with all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, I haven't had time to think about it at all because I had this GT this last weekend. So to start off with this last weekend, it was supposed to be a 6-round GT hosted at Squad Marks in Southern California in Orange County, and we ended up going through a bunch of different custom missions. It was a reasonably strong GT with, I believe, like 34 players was our final player count, and it was pretty strong. There was several players there who were Team USA or Team USA hopefuls going forward in the next couple of years, and we got to see a lot of different armies come. There was a lot more Orc players and a lot more Demons players and a lot of Guard players that I wasn't really expecting as we were actually going into the event. So it ended up being very interesting. We played it all on Games Workshop 1 and later Games Workshop 6 on day 2, and with all custom missions, they were all fairly standard seeming missions, but there was one very interesting one where we ended up playing Supply Drop and Hidden Supplies, which is not something that you tend to see very often. So we'll go ahead and talk about that as we get towards some of our later games. So the list I brought to this one, I ended up titling it "We Have Wesley at Home," which, if you guys are familiar at all, Wesley, aka Nemo the Fish, played at LVO recently, did have some controversy around his game that he played up against Scary, but ultimately, this is very inspired by the kind of list that he has been playing for the past year and a half or so, both during the Index Detachment Combined Regiment as well as during Bridgehead. But I ended up playing 2 Death Corps Marshals, Gaunt's Ghosts, 3 Militarum Tempestus Command Squads. This is, of course, in Bridgehead. One of them has the Bombast-Class Vox-array, which I just call Cool Radio Man. One of them has the Can't Be Overwatch enhancement, and one is otherwise normal. We have 1 Platoon Command Squad, Sly Marbo, Ursula Creed, 2 units of Catachan Jungle Fighters, 2 units of 20 Death Corps of Krieg, with all the special weapons you can put in there. Uh, it ends up being 3 units of 10 Tempestus Scions, 2 of them with Melta Plasma, 1 of them with Plasma Volley Gun, 1 5-man unit of Tempestus Scions, 1 10-man unit of Attilan Rough Riders, 3 units of heavy weapon squads with Mortars, 1 Kasrkin unit, 1 Ogrim Bodyguard, which is attached to the Platoon Command Squad, which makes one of the Krieg bricks even more difficult to take down because after you lose the first 19 Kriegsmen and you still have the med pack left alive, the Ogrim Bodyguard is the one who ends up starting to take saves, and so you can really prolong the time that the unit actually does survive and is able to res guys. Then we had 1 unit of Tempestus Aquilons. I kind of went back and forth on how much I liked the Aquilons versus having another unit of Kasrkin in there. I felt like the Aquilons were almost as good, especially on turn 2, but if you really needed a little bit more like presence on the game early, maybe an extra unit of Kasrkin probably would have been a little bit better. And then, of course, the Rough Riders do the same job. They are there to try and make sure your opponent doesn't just run at you straight up at the beginning of the game because you have this 120-point really effective trading piece. Other than that, you're going to be doing a lot of damage with all the Scions as they drop in. Their battle line, a lot of them are OC3 because they have regimental standards attached, and on missions that have mission rules like raise banners or stalwarts, suddenly they not only are doing actions and scoring points, but they're also just generally very powerful. So to be entirely honest, playing this, I don't think I actually put in nearly as many reps into this army as I needed to, and more importantly, I don't think I got the reps on this army that I needed to in the right matchups. I was expecting there to be a lot more Marines players, a couple Tau players, but there ended up being a ton of Orc players and a bunch of Demons players, and those are armies that just kind of run at you. And I did not get that kind of practice. I ended up practicing it mostly into shooting matchups instead of the melee matchups that I think are probably the harder matchups for this detachment, and that really ends up biting me as we start going through the rest of the games. So during my first game, I ended up playing up against Michael and his Vanguard Onslaught Tyranids, and we can go ahead and go through his list because I remember looking at this, I was like, please, I really do not want to play this. I really don't want to play it on a certain mission. So he's got a lot of infiltrate. The Vanguard Onslaught gives everything like I think it's advance in charge, or and most things fall back in charge, so they can always get charges off pretty much all the time. He's got one Death Leaper, three Genestealer Broodlords, one of them with I don't even know what this enhancement does. The Neuro Tyrant, the Parasite of Mortrex, which was a bit of an interesting tech piece. A Winged Hive Tyrant with the Chameleonic, so I think it has like stealth and benefit of cover. It's basically like permanent lit smoke. One unit of 10 Gargoyles, one Biovore, three units of 10 Genestealers, two Lictors, two units of 6 Von Ryan's Leapers, and then two Exocrines. And this is just a crazy jail list. All of the Von Ryan's Leapers they're absolutely huge, and they just take up so much space, and they're actually like reasonably difficult to take down. They're basically just like Tyranid. They're almost like Tyranid warriors, where they have like a 6-up invul, and they're like T5 3 wounds apiece. Like they will die to anything real you put into them, but you do have to put something real to kill them, and they infiltrate. And then Genestealers, I can't remember if they advance in. Oh, they have advance in charge because of the um, detachment rule. But yeah, other than that, it's just you get hit with this first wave, then you get hit with this second wave. You're back behind like your side of the board the entire time. So turn 2, you should expect to only score your home. Turn 3, you should expect to only score your home. After that, there's a Shadow in the Warp on like turn 4, where you can potentially look at another turn where you're only scoring like one primary. And so this entire list is just trying to stop you from scoring primary turn 2, primary turn 3, and then limit your primary turn 4. And then by turn 5, when you've shot your way through it, you can actually score primary then. And this is a bit of a nightmare situation for Guard, because one of the things that Guard generally struggles with is because we are a Leadership 7 army that loses access to our army role being orders when we are battle shocked. And when we're doing battle strikes at -1 because the Neuro Tyrant exists, Shroud in the Warp can be devastating towards our ability to score. And all of this coming together ends up being a very tough position for us to end up playing. We did end up playing this one on a clock because I mean, I've got like 170 models in my army. This has a lot of models as well. It's going to be forcing a lot of saves. So I told Michael pretty early on, it's like, hey, let's go ahead. I want to do this. I probably won't have a lot of time to banter during this game because it's going to be a really tough game for me to like try and play through. I'm not trying to be a dick at all. I'm going to need like every second of my clock in order to actually play this one through. So anyway, so mission 1 was, of course, a custom mission. We were playing Hammer and Anvil, Take and Hold, and Raise Banners. And ultimately, this one is a bit tough for my Bridgehead list to actually play into, simply because if you actually like take a look at a lot of these like firing lines, it's really hard to hold this one if there's anything that can shoot down this primary lane. There's this giant pocket that has relatively easy chargers here and here, so it's really hard to hold this one. And this one is a little bit easier to hold up here because this is a pretty harsh shooting angle, but ultimately it's really hard to safely be on the no man's land objectives. One of the things that is really important is being able to take like a 20-man Death Korps of Krieg unit here. You can't actually stand on the objective behind this wall because this is a little bit too big, but if you have like all of your Death Korps here and you res guys onto the middle point, it is a great way to score primary against shooting armies. But of course, the army that Michael was playing was not a shooting army. So as we go directly into it, one of the major things that I saw about this one was if I lose both the defender and the go first roll, it's going to be really tough to get out of jail because he's going to have, he can put like Von Ryan's Leapers, he can pick wherever they want, and like Von Ryan Leapers will block out like that much of the deployment space. So I'm going to have to use something on the other side in order to try and limit like how much pressure he can put on me at the very beginning. Luckily, I have both Marbo and Gaunt's Ghost that I can block out some of his infiltrate. But Michael ends up winning the defender roll off, and he starts off by putting his first unit of Von Ryan's Leapers like here, but he didn't spread them out as much as he probably could have because I know, like, with Gaunt's Ghost, when you have, like, a 2-inch coherency, you know, you can... It's something like this. And then your 9-inch bubble, you know, something like that. It's almost impossible for your opponent to put any infiltrators. And if I had wanted to, like, maybe I put, like, Gaunt's Ghosts here or something so that he can't put anything more over in this spot. But he ended up, Michael ended up doing them relatively tight. He ended up having his Von Ryan's Leapers, like, close to base with each other here. And that gives me a lot more freedom to actually deploy my Gaunt's Ghosts. Because instead of, like, being up to here, I was only blocked out up to about here. And that gave me an opportunity to put my Gaunt's Ghosts, you know, something in here, such that at least this, he wasn't going to be able to put something with Infiltrate on this point. And then Michael took a second unit of Von Ryan's Leapers and did a similar thing, like right in here. So his very beginning of the game, if he goes first, is going to be moving very aggressively like this. Okay, I know that's going to be like the first thing that Michael's going to end up doing. So, Leapers. I have Gaunt's Ghost somewhere in here. I don't think they're on the point, if I remember correctly. But then after that, I have like Catachan, Kasrkin, and then one Deathcore brick here, one Deathcore brick here. Mortars, basically just like lining the back over here. And one of the lucky things is that, those last ones aren't there. Mortars are like here, and then Creed is like hanging out over here, where it's relatively hard for all of his infiltrate to get to. Big brick of horses here. Then Marbo was kind of like hanging out over here. And then I, of course, had Cool Radio Man. I'm going to trademark that. Cool Radio Man. Hanging out here. The whole point was that I wanted to have this Scion unit and another Scion unit like here, such that when these Von Ryan's Leapers come in, if they go first, the two Scion units should be able to clean them up, even if they're not on a point. With Take and Hold, Raise Banners, if I go first, I can at least deal with all of the jail relatively. Like, the jail is not as powerful if I go first, but the downside of it is it means that Michael's endgame scoring, because he's going second on Take and Hold, does end up becoming very powerful. Couple major things that happened during this game. Main things to kind of think about is on turn 1, when I went first, Catachan came out like this, and we did like decent damage. We killed like 3 out of each of these. There's also like a Lictor over here. Scions like moved forward a little bit, and we did like some more damage. I think this one was down to like 2 or whatever. But we mostly killed that. The other major thing that we ended up doing was he had like a unit of Gene Stealers like here, and like here or something. And our mortars shelled this one and killed about half of it, which was nice. That's something that is really good because Gene Stealers don't really have saves. And they're just 2 wounds. You just like pepper them and you just get so much, you're able to just kill them really effectively with the mortars. And so that's kind of how our first turn went. We didn't really create a whole lot of pressure, but we were able to alleviate a lot of the early pressure that Michael was going to be putting on us going into his turn. The Von Ryan's Leapers, they did their thing. They charged in, they tagged, like, Catachan, or no, they killed all the Catachan, so they, like, tagged one of the big Krieg bricks here, they tagged, like, another big Krieg brick over here, and there was some pressure there. The biggest thing for me is I didn't really put anything on the No Man's Land objectives, because I knew that it was going to be too easy. I think I put some Kasrkin. Yeah, I was able to put some Kasrkin here, but with his gargoyles already deployed over here, 12-inch move, shoot, advance and move, like they're moving 18 plus d6 inches. He's able to take me off of this primary pretty easily, but I forced his gargoyles to come out. And then turn 2 was kind of my, all right, I need to clear all of this. I need to clear all the Leapers. I need to push a lot of things back. I'm going to try and kill a lot of gargoyles. And that happened again. But I only scored, so I started off my turn 2. That's not my color. I scored a 5 on turn 2, and then Michael scored a 15 on turn 2 because he's holding 1, 2, and 3, whereas I was only holding 1. Okay. Next turn, not a whole lot of like super interesting like map play happens. I score a 5 turn 3. I score another 5 because I'm only able to hold my home. He's denied me this one. I can't get to these ones yet. And I think Michael ends up scoring. Does he end up scoring another 15? Oh, he only scored a 10. He was only holding it was this one with a lictor and his home, so he scored a 10. And then similar thing, he had he was able to put, I think it was the Hive Tyrant, like, and he just dropped like a bunch of Gene Stealers on here, so he ended up scoring another 10. But I'm slowly like scoring my secondaries. Oh, on turn 3, he actually calls Shadow in the Warp, and I end up scoring a 0 on turn 3 because I fail every Battle Shock except one. I was able to do it successfully with Sly Marbo, who was like, I think it was here at the time. But regardless, like I'm not scoring any primary. I scored a 5 on turn 2, and I scored a 0 on turn 3. And then as we see another 10 going towards Michael, I'm finally clearing out everything. My Scions have come in, they've done their job, they've cleared out everything, and because he took his one battle line unit with his gargoyles, when they came out this way, I killed them. And I had asked him pretty early on in the game, I think when we were setting up, I asked him, so first off, what is your... Oh, he's supposed to have one more point, because he had raised banners, and he raised a banner here. But I asked him early on, what is your battle line? And it was only the gargoyles. Whereas in my army, I have 2 units of Catachan, 2 units of Death Korps of Krieg, and because of my Warlord being a Tempestus commander, I also have 3 units of 10 Scions and 1 unit of 5 Scions. So I have 8 battle line units in my army. And as we like really get towards crunch time, I end up calling a secret mission after 3, and I end up taking the War of Attrition, the one where you need to get battle line into your opponent's deployment zone, and your opponent needs to have no battle line left. And because like these gargoyles end up dying relatively early on, I was going to be able to do this pretty much for free. I just needed to take a unit of Scions and make sure that they were relatively safe to basically just stand over here. And I was able to do that relatively easily. The rest of the game ends up being Michael holding another... I end up holding a 10 on turn 4. Michael ends up holding a 15. And then he actually only has a 10 because he just runs out of assets to stand on every objective at the end of the game. But I do end up scoring my 20 on Taken Hold, or not Taken Hold, but the War of Attrition. Because like I said, I think Michael thought that I was going to take the Warlord one, because my son, Warlord, was around here at the time, but that one is way harder for this unit to get over here as long as he can like block out any of the screening. So I was just like, no, I'm just going to take the War of Attrition one. I end up scoring every single one of my secondaries, whereas Michael ends up not doing super hot on his secondaries. He actually bricks a lot of them, and I end up winning this one 85 to 80 at the end. But yeah, the game went pretty similarly to kind of how I was expecting it to go. My expectation was that I was going to score a 5 on turn 2, a 5 on turn 3, and then I was going to call a secret mission because my opponent had no battle line. And I was just going to, at some point, he was not going to be able to clear out all of my units, or all of my Scions. I was going to have one of them on turn 5 that I could just drop somewhere safely in his deployment zone. And that is pretty close to exactly what happened. I scored pretty much all of my secondary, whereas Michael was kind of struggling with that. I talked to him a little bit after the event as well. One of the things that I think a lot of people kind of get stuck up on is like how pile-in consolidates work, because there's actually a lot of nuance to the pile-in consolidate. So like an easy example is, let's say I have like whatever, a model here, and you have this model that is in base to base, and these other 2 models, right? And then you do your pile-in, and you... So a lot of people think that you have to go directly in, and this model is going to go like 3 inches here, and this model is going to go 3 inches here. That's not necessarily how it works. All it says is that it needs to be closer towards the enemy model and in base to base if possible, but the order in which you move the models is at your discretion. So if you just see the first part like base to base if possible, yes. If this is, this is one way to get as many models in base to base as possible. But what you can actually do is this model, if you have the movement for it, this model can move 3 inches this way and potentially make it so that this one can't move 3 inches and get into base to base, right? Because you're measuring, does the back of my base clear my other model? Oftentimes the answer is no. And so this model, if it can't, like this model here, if it can't base to base, you can just put it over here where it's not base to base, and then it can have another consolidate move afterwards. So it could potentially go from all the way in the back over here, piles in, and then it can consolidate all the way over here and slingshot around. And that's something that Michael wasn't really doing to his best advantage, and so he ended up losing out on a lot of movement. I think he could have gotten a couple more primary because of that, and because the game was a 5-point difference at 85 to 80. That can change who the winner is. This can be a draw. This can be a win for him, just with a little bit more understanding of how the charge and fight phase like movement actually works. But Michael is a great guy. We ended up talking quite a bit throughout, like towards the end of the game. We talked about different things. We're actually playing up against his team in a Teams League as well. So he's trying to figure out like what armies they want to put into my guard, because apparently I have a reputation in SoCal. Well, of course, I don't necessarily know exactly what that is, but it was pretty cool to listen to. But anyway, that was game one. This was a bit of a nightmare scenario for me because it was a jail list on a mission that was already going to be hard for me to hold primary, and I ended up barely squeaking this one out, 85 to 80. So after barely beating one of the lists that I was kind of expecting to have a nightmare of a matchup against, I ended up playing up against another army that is a bit of a nightmare for Bridgehead to play against. And this one was being played by Dylan, who I played in the last round of Cali Cup that I played in San Diego a couple months ago. And he was playing Necrons at the time, and now he's playing the Chaos Demons Legion of Excess, the new Slanesh detachment that is posting like 60% plus win rates. I remember seeing like on stat. Actually, let's take a look right now. If you guys don't know about this website, it's great. It is stat-check.com, and this was last updated about a week ago. And we take a look at the Chaos Demons, and it'll take a moment to load. Legion of Excess, nice. Pulling a 69% weekend before we include the LVO weekends events. So, a very, very powerful detachment. Anyway, couple things. Let's go ahead and go through the list. The first one is Bellicor. He's got the Lone Operative 18 aura, very powerful. He's got Selesky. I honestly don't know what that does. Damascus Slanesh, that just runs in. It's just like a lone-up character. The Contorted Epitome, which gives you a 4-up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds, which is really powerful in this detachment. 1 Exalted Secret Chariot character, 1 unit of 10 Demonettes, 1 unit of 10 Plague Bearers, a Secret Chariot, 3 units of 5 Seekers, 2 units of 6 Fiends, 1 unit of 3 Fiends, and a Slanesh Soul Grinder. Now, if you haven't played against this, there's a couple major tricks that Legion of Excess has. Firstly, everything has like fallback in charge, which is very powerful. Secondly, the next thing that they have is they have the combo of the Contorted Epitome plus 10 Demonettes. You attach them together, and there's a stratagem by which during either the fight phase or your opponent's shooting phase, you get to choose. You can say, these 2 units within 12 inches of each other, I can pass off wounds from this unit onto the other unit, but the second unit takes the damage as mortal wounds, which is very powerful because the Contorted Epitome gives you a 4-up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds. So you can take things on the 4-up Invul that a lot of different things has. I think Fiends might have a 4-up. Something has a 4-up Invul. And then if you fail that Invul, then you also have the 4-up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds. So if you are able to kill the Demonettes with the Contorted Epitome before you start putting shots into the thing that you actually want to kill, you can turn off this wound battery that they're able to put themselves on. Because realistically, this is... So you have 10 Demonettes. They each have, I think it's 1 wound. But with 4-up Feel No Pain, it's 20 wounds. And then the Contorted Epitome has 8 wounds. And with a 4-up Feel No Pain against the Mortals, it's functionally 16. So you got to get through 36 You basically got to do 36 damage before you can even start doing damage to the thing you're trying to shoot at. So if you're able to kill this unit, it's a really big deal. And that's where the second part of the combo is very powerful, is some armies rely on like indirect in order to kill this battery, right? There's a triple whirlwinds list in like Ironstorm. Guard tries to shoot this as well. And if you can kill this unit first, then everything else becomes significantly less durable. However, because Be'lakor has Lone Operative 18 as an aura for everything within 6 inches of his unit, I could not mortar this Demonet unit, which is a huge difference in being able to like actually use the mortars effectively. I think they spent a little bit of time shooting some Seekers, which is cool. But the major thing about this army is just so fast, and with an army like Guard that doesn't have any real melee, you can just give up the fights first because the Guard is going to be like, well, I'm going to kill like 2 Demonets in my, fight, and then you get full rerolls to hit, full rerolls to wound. So there's a lot of tricks that this army has. It is way more durable and it is way faster than I think a lot of people were expecting when it came out. We ended up playing this one on round 2, which was Search and Destroy, Linchpin, and Adapter Die. Adapter Die means that you can redraw two secondaries, or you can change your fixed objectives halfway through the game. Now, most of this was okay, but there was a couple of major problems with the army and this way that I was trying to play it. The first one is I don't really have any shooting that's beyond 24 inches. So, if I had like, being able to post up like a, that's not my color. If I was able to post up like a Lehman Russ or a Rogel Dorn, I can at least prevent my opponent from like deploying things here, or at least carelessly deploying things here. The other major thing is my mortars don't really have a job in this matchup because they're supposed to shoot Demonettes, but they don't really do much damage to Seekers, and they really don't do any damage to Fiends. So I actually kind of was using them as like I probably should have been more aggressively using them as screens instead of doing anything else with them. I ended up using like one of them, deploying it over here so it could like move this way and like do actions. But the major problem I had with this is because it's Search and Destroy and Fiends are beasts, they move like 14 inches and they can move through walls. So, I mean, this distance straight across the middle is 18. But this distance from like this corner to like this corner, this is like 13 inches. So like Fiends can just whee incredibly fast, and they have 1 CP advance and charge. So they are super fast. They're going to mulch everything in my army super, super efficiently with reroll hits, reroll wounds, and I can't really do any damage before they actually come in. Dylan ended up taking one like 6-man unit of Fiends here, one 3-man unit of Fiends, and then the other 6-man unit of Fiends, something like this. He had his units of Seekers. I think it was like, I want to say it was like Seekers, Seekers, and like Seekers. And then Be'lakor was chilling like here-ish. And then he went first, and he ran at me. This unit of Fiends and Seekers, like all of this ran this way. This, I think it ran into Catachan, and I like heroiced with a unit of horses that were here, and I actually did like pretty decent damage into the Seekers like when it came in here. But other Seekers came this way. Fiends set themselves up like they were all kind of like hiding in the pocket with Be'lakor. And the question is like, can I stop that? And I think what I ended up doing was I think I tried to do a little bit too much, and I think I underestimated like how powerful his swings were actually going to be, because I put like 1 unit of 20 Krieg here, 1 unit of 20 Krieg here, and I still had several of my mortars like back here. I think what I'm supposed to actually do in this matchup, knowing that the mortars don't do anything, is I think I'm supposed to switch their positions, right? Instead of having the Krieg in front, I'm pretty confident I'm supposed to actually put like mortars out here so that he can swing into the mortars. I don't care about losing them because they don't have any targets in his army anyway. So like put the mortars in front, put the Krieg behind in a position where he can't consolidate into them, and then the Krieg bricks plus the Scion bricks when they come down should hopefully kill everything in his army that's not Be'lakor, right? You know, I leave Be'lakor alive, but I kill everything else. He ends up going into turn 3 with like chariots and Be'lakor, and that's about it. And at that point, I will still have enough of my army intact that I can bring the game back. However, what I actually did, or what actually happened, is on his turn 2, I had, like, again, like, unit of Krieg here, unit of Krieg about here, and he put units of Fiends into both of them. Big 6-man unit of Fiends comes here, ends up being on the point after the fight is over, but nearly slaughters everyone in this unit. He had like 3-man unit and 6-man unit of Fiends. They come in here and they also almost just full kill the unit of Krieg. Like they are both down to like 4 models each by the time this fight is over. And then what happens is on my turn, I drop unit Scions here, unit Scions here, unit Scions here in order to shoot this way, and this way. Oh, also there's a Soul Grinder here at this point. And then I draw, I put everything else in my army to try and alleviate this pressure. Because, again, my whole idea is if I can deal with this, then the game becomes fine. Unfortunately, he has his, like, Demonette battery with the Epitome, like, somewhere in here, such that it is within 12 inches. I end up dropping a unit of Aquilons over here to try and kill the Demonettes. I don't. I kill 8 or 9 of them, which means that there's still enough value in the unit in order to actually use like the 4-up Feel No Pains. And so, like, I full kill this unit. I do a lot of damage to Soul Grinder, but I don't kill it. And then I think I kill this down to 1, and this is still at 3. And the Soul Grinder, or this is still alive, and then he tags everything in my army. He like Rapid Ingress is a unit here that like stands back up on a 2+. This comes and tags the Scions. This unit here comes and tags Scions. Soul Grinder comes in, tags Scions. So I have like nothing left to screen for the Scions, and we just call the game. I'm like, I cannot kill anything in your army anymore. I cannot escape from the fact, like, you're going to charge me over and over again. You're just going to cycle charge me. I can't fall back. I can't kill you in melee. I can't do anything. I got run over. And yeah, I think the major takeaways that I had from this is I tried to put 2 units of Catachan in order to screen out. I think I'm only supposed to put just the 1 in order to allow people to come in, and then screen the mortars. Like, just use the mortars. It is okay to say, hey, they don't do anything in this. I even made a video about this not that long ago on how to use units flexibly, and I was not able to identify that in the moment, and that's part of like why I was saying, because I ended up losing this game 41-94. I just got blasted. Yeah, it's definitely just a spot of I did not have the reps necessary into the armies that I actually knew I was going to have trouble with my army, and so just got crushed. Not a whole lot more to say about it. That was round 2. I mean, Dylan was a gem the entire time about it. I think both times that we played up against each other, it was like, all right, how many 4-ups are we hitting? Oh, you're hitting 4-ups. I'm not hitting 4-ups. Or, like you're hitting enough of your invul saves. Cool, I don't do any damage. Oh, the other major stratagem that would have broken the game is they have a stratagem that whenever a unit declares a shooting attack, they can reactively say, you need to take a battle shock test, and if you pass, you're -1 to hit. If you fail, you're battle shocked, and also you can't shoot that thing anymore. That is the most terrifying stratagem in the game for Bridgehead, because a good opponent will not let you put your Scions such that they have like multiple things that they can shoot and still be safe. So he ended up doing it on this unit. When this unit over here activated, I had to pass a battle shock test, and if I failed, I lost both ballistics or both take aim and first rank fire. But I passed the battle shock, and was still just like I, I was just like, it was very close with like how much damage I was doing to the fiends. So ultimately, it was just if I had failed that battle shock, the game would have looked even worse. So ultimately, pretty interesting. Another major line I potentially could have taken is refused flank. Just like refuse to play on one side of the board and just like let this unit of 6 fiends just kind of hang out here and take my entire army and just try and kill everything over here. Something to think about. Again, something I did not have the reps in order to make that judgment call in the moment. So just got to play more. All right. Round 3, my last round of day 1, going up against Jeremy and his Stormlands Dark Angels. And this is a bit of an offbeat, like, homebrewed list overall. It is kind of a jail list, but it's nowhere near as threatening for Bridgehead as some of the other ones because it tries to do it with some of the perfect targets for Silence to actually be shooting at. So go ahead and go through it. He had Azrael, and they were leading, I think it was Inner Circle Companions. That sounds right. Um, he had the Lionel Johnson, Samael, who was leading an Outrider squad of six bikes. One unit of heavy intercessors, one unit of assault intercessors with jump packs, 2 units of Deathwing Knights, all with maces. The Inner Circle Companions, like I mentioned, with Azrael. One unit of Reavers, one unit of Scouts, and then 2 Ballistic Dreadnoughts. And this I knew was going to kind of be the main way that I was going to lose this was if Jeremy just hit way too many 4-up invulns. And one of the main things about this is so much of Stormlands relies on there's a -1 to hit, -1 to wound stratagem, and then you have like advance and charge just army wide. So you really need to land like all of these really long range charges with this kind of list, and he just doesn't have like the unit count to play the entire board in the way that Bridgehead can. Yeah, the Ballistus does not that much because one of the major things about like this Bridgehead list is if you put take cover on Death Core of Krieg, right? A Ballistus Dread will kill like 5 or 6 guys, and then you res half of that back. So like the Ballistus Dreadnoughts just like don't like just aren't scary in this matchup at all. The only things that are really scary are the Outriders are fairly scary because they can actually do some decent damage to a 20-man group of Krieg. The Inner Circle Companions are kind of scary, but the Deathwing Knights, like they're gonna hit the targets that the guard player wants you to. And then the other major thing is you can only -1 to hit, -1 to wound one target, and Scions, it's pretty easy to like double order them or to get full reroll hits because something's touching a point. So you're going to be hitting on 3s rerolling or 3s rerolling 1s with sustained anyway, with just a huge number of shots, and +1 to wound, -1 to wound cancels out. So we're still going to be wounding basically everything on 3s with all of our good guns. And that's kind of how the game ended up going. Round 3 was on Tipping Point, Scorched Earth, and Stalwarts, which I think might be the single best like mission in the pack for this list, especially because we were playing it on Games Workshop 1, where you can fairly routinely like hide guys here. You can sometimes get like a Death Core of Krieg unit that'll just like puke guys onto this point, and because all of our Scions are battle line, they can do actions and still shoot. So you can drop them in. You can drop guys like down here and be like, hey, we are not only going to be containing for 3 points, we're also going to be killing like an entire unit of Space Marines while we do it. It's just incredibly powerful for this, and especially with the kind of games where we're trying to kill Marines, we don't have a lot of problems with that. The other major thing is it really removes a lot of the danger of your opponent just going like, here you go, deal with me, because on Tipping Point, Like you really, really just need to use like this area in here to stage, and that's far. Like it's just far from our deployment zone. So anyway, Jeremy ends up going first in this game, and he kind of just has to put a lot of things out in the middle of the board. The first thing he does, he takes like his big Outrider unit that's up here, and they move. I think they move here, and they actually like. Do they hit a charge turn one? They do. He takes this unit and he like charges it into a unit of Kasrkin that are just like here. Um, but one of the big things that he ends up doing is he has like his scout squad, and he like initially deployed them something like this. And one of the big mistakes, there was a couple like small mistakes throughout the course of the game that really started to add up quite a bit, is that this scout was visible like down like this line. Like you could definitely see this scout without working too hard for it. Um, when if the scout had just like moved like a little bit this way and they were like here, the only thing I was going to be able to shoot at them with was going to be mortars. Um, because Jeremy had sabotage, being able to stop this scout unit from actually pulling the sabotage off was huge because I ended up sticking him with it for another turn. He only got 2 points and no prisoners. Um, and yeah, he ended up not scoring secondaries basically at all. Uh, but the other major thing about this is one of the things that this Stormlands thing does fairly well. He had a unit of heavy intercessors, which I never really wanted to kill throughout the course of the game, but he was also able to just put like a ton of 4-up invul things on the middle objective and kind of ask how I'm going to deal with it. So he ended up scoring a lot of 10s on his primary overall. As we're going to my turn two or my turn one, I ended up making a small mistake in hanging on to sabotage, or like keeping or not redrawing sabotage on my turn one. But basically, I started with 2 Nexus on the board as I am wanted to do in matchups where I know my opponent is just going to run at me. And I had one unit of Scions that was chilling out here, and then Cool Radio Man was hanging out over here. And on my turn one, I picked these guys up, or end of his turn one, and then I drop them over here where there's nothing that he can do to shoot them, and there's a big unit of Outriders here just hanging out on the point. This unit of Scions moves up a little bit so it can also pull, so I'm just putting 2 units of Scions onto Samael and friends on a point, and that unit just evaporates, and there goes basically all of his ability to threaten my side of the board for the rest of the game. The other thing is I took a unit of horses that are here, as they always were, and they run out this way. They contribute a little bit of fire towards these scouts. And, you know, my horses contribute fire, all 3 of my mortars come through, and we kill the scouts exactly, which was really big because, you know, he let me shoot like 10 extra lasgun shots into them, which did like 3 damage to the scouts, and that's a really big difference over the course of the game. Because I kept him with sabotage, he didn't get a CP for discarding it, and he ended up spending a CP to discard sabotage later on because he didn't think he could do it for the rest of the game, which I agreed with. After that, the game ended up becoming a battle for his objectives, never really for mine, because I was able to go ahead and take like a mostly shattered unit of Kasrkin, and they just kind of hid here for the rest of the game because he had a Ballistus Dread, I think it was here, and like a Ballistus Dread here, so they were never going to be able to pull line of sight on this one dude. He had a bunch of units of like Deathwing Knight, or one unit of Deathwing Knights here, one unit of Deathwing Knights here, and they were there. Oh, another major mistake that Jeremy ended up making was he ended up moving Azrael and the Inner Circle Companions, and because Stormlands has like a reactive move, oh, this is the charge that he actually hits around turn one, is his Inner Circle Companions are here, and they reactive move, but they aren't He moves them all this direction, and this guy who's here barely can't make it over the wall. Um, Whereas if this guy had gone over to this side of the wall, I wouldn't have been able to see them. And so it ends up meaning that like this unit of Inner Circle Companions ends up eating a free Overwatch from the unit of Scions that comes like out this way and does a lot of damage. It kills like 2 of them when they actually end up moving. But when the battle ends up becoming about these objectives, um, meaning that I'm freely scoring my 10 over here, I have so much more control simply because I have just way more units. I think Jeremy was a little bit surprised at how durable all of the Death Corps of Krieg really were. And yeah, I score almost every card except for the sabotage that I drew at the very beginning of the game. And probably the funniest moment of the entire game was when the Lion just like came through and was just like hanging out, and I just mobbed him with guys because it's just like I don't care if you kill all of them as long as, or I don't care if you kill most of them as long as I still have one of them alive, one of them still in combat with the lion so that he cannot move on your turn and he cannot do anything. That's all I'm really asking. So by the end of the game, he just had like the heavy intercessors over here. I think he had a ballistus dread, and Sly Marbo actually pops in, who because he was hanging out like in here pretty much the entire time. He pops in over here, and he's the one who shoots the lion to death. So that was pretty funny. Um, let's see. Yeah, this game ended up being fairly straightforward. I scored my 45 for holding 10 or holding 2 for 4 turns in a row and burning 1 in no man's land. I scored 34 on secondary. I probably should have scored like 37 to 40 based on discarding my card at the very beginning with sabotage. But Jeremy only ends up scoring 62 because he holds 10, 10, 10, and then 5 because I finally take him off his middle of the board primary on turn 5. But he also just doesn't have the unit count to do his secondaries. He ends up getting 2 on turn 1, 5 on turn 2, 5 on turn 3, 2 on turn 4, and then he actually scores no secondaries that he drew on turn 5 despite seeing 4 of them. Because he actually like he had too few units to try and do engage in all fronts on turn 5, so he got to free redraw that one, discarded one that he couldn't do, and he was out of things. So that was really funny. At least it was funny to me. Anyway, so with that, I end up ending day 1 2-1, which means I am no longer in the hunt for actually winning the event. However, I go back. I feel like I played 2 matchups that were going to be very hard in round 1 against Michael's Tyranids and round 2 against Dylan's Slanesh Demons. I was able to pull out one of them, and then in my third round, I was like, yeah, this should probably be a fairly controlled win on my side, and it was. So I feel like I passed one test, failed one test, and then I didn't screw up my round 3. For day 2, I come back, and it is officially supposed to be a 6-round event. However, I talked to the TO and some of the other players around, and generally, like, the attitude was mostly like, yeah, I think I'd just prefer to play 2 rounds today. And so, as we go into it, there was like I knew I was supposed to play a certain player. I was supposed to play a guy who had actually played like the day before the GT, which is a practice game trying to figure out like how his list and how tactical Brigade Orcs works. So I actually put like a fair amount of prep the Saturday night in order to try and figure out like how I was supposed to play up against this tactical brigade going into a different mission than the one that we had played up against each other. And then we actually get there, and there were a couple drops going into day 2, and we needed to repair, and I ended up playing up against someone very different than the one I was expecting. The player I ended up playing up against in my round 4 was Mark and his Chaos Demons, and it was just a fairly standard big demons index detachment. He had Bellicor, he had the Great and Clean one with the 4 Feel No Pain, he had Lord of Change with the cool gun enhancement, he had Shalaxi Hellbane, 2 units of 3 Nurglings, 1 unit of 10 Plague Bearers, 3 Beasts of Nurgle, 2 units of Flesh Hounds, and a Soul Grinder. And yeah, this is we were playing this before the most recent FAQ and like balance changes where Chaos Demons can 6-inch deep strike and charge. That was not a thing that we were playing with at this event. This mission was the really interesting one, which ended up being Search and Destroy, Supply Drop, and Hidden Supplies. So we don't have this objective here in the middle. Instead, they are something like this. And I drew the most beautiful circles you've ever seen. The main thing about these two objectives is they're actually fairly hard to stand on without just like getting shot over and over again. But Search and Destroy is kind of an enemy of Bridgehead, especially against an army that has any realistic shooting, because this is very often just like not, like we can't really put guys here basically at all. And so because of like all the different angles that you can shoot in and out, it actually becomes very difficult in order to try and deploy things, because you only really have like, I'll use a different color. You only really have like this is relatively safe, this is relatively safe, and then back here. So you're just missing like large sections of your deployment zone that you can actually use and not just die to shooting armies at the beginning of the game. And this was another game where I kind of just got ran at and didn't deal with it properly, which again kind of goes to like I didn't have sufficient experience in this style of matchup in order to like make sure I was doing the right things the entire time. So the first thing that happened is Mark just like parked Shalaxi here, and then his Great and Clean one, Lord of Change, Bellicor was somewhere in here, and then he just took like all of his little stuff. A Beast of Nurgle, dogs came this way, a couple Nurglings were here, Plague Bears came this way, hung out, and Shalaxi just came and made a charge into some Kasrkin, and only killed like 6 of them, which was pretty cool because, I mean, it just meant that the Kasrkin just lived going in there, and that probably should have been my first thing. So one of the things that I've kind of run into as a problem is under allocating resources into like major threats, and Shalaxi is one of them. We'll talk about the rest of it in a moment. The Great Unclean One walks over here, stands on this objective. Lord of Change walks this way, and kind of like I said, like there's only so much safe space. So I had my unit of Deathcore Krieg like here, but I couldn't both protect it on this angle and this angle, and so he was able to put some shots into this what do you call it? This unit of Deathcore of Krieg. But then when Shalaxi's here, I have cool Radio Man, and then I have like another unit of Scions that was something like here. And they both, and in general, I kind of expected that I was going to be able to kill Shalaxi because I was going to put about 1,000 points of shooting into that unit. But I underestimated, or rather, okay, whenever I see a unit like Shalaxi or Catachan, I'll generally look at like statistics against these kind of units before like I get to any event. But Shalaxi is one that I hadn't looked at in a long time, and I hadn't looked at it while I was using Scions, because I had last looked at it while I was playing Combined Regiment when I had lethal hits with tanks. And I generally like mentally equate like one Scion brick will do about as much damage as a Leman Russ into a lot of vehicles, in like vehicles and monsters in general. And so this unit got picked up. It ended up coming over here. This unit ended up coming over here with the new drop. This unit ended up coming out this way to shoot at Shalaxi. I had a unit of horses here that ended up charging, and I had the Deathcore of Krieg unit kind of spread out like this. And in general, I just made a mistake. I made a really big mistake where I took this unit, it only had one thing to shoot at, and it shot into Shalaxi. And then this unit, I had set it up such that it's supposed to shoot at Shalaxi, but it can shoot at Big Bird, like down this line. And then this unit of Krieg kind of like splits fire into them. And the major mistake I have is like, when I look at a lot of this math, I generally end up coming to a spot where it's like, I think this is supposed to, I think I'm supposed to overkill Shalaxi fairly consistently. And I didn't even get close. I under-allocated resources. This unit actually ended up splitting into Big Bird and Shalaxi. And it loses me the game. I get soloed by this model. Um, because Shalaxi ends up coming in, tags, I throw the horses at it, and Shalaxi just lives on like 9. I do no damage at all with the horses on the charge. And then I lose all of my Scion bricks on turn 2. And it's kind of like the same thing. Like, I don't know. I feel like I was a little bit frazzled. Frazzled's not the right word, but like I'd put so much work into like prepping for the Orc matchup that I was expecting to play that like when I got hit with the Demons matchup, I just didn't. I don't know. I just went into autopilot a little bit and didn't really think my decisions through and really identify like how important it was that I kill Shalaxi in this. I either full devote my army into all killing Shalaxi instead of the unit teleporting over here where it could shoot into Big Bird, but then if it doesn't kill Big Bird, then Big Bird shoots back, and I probably just pick it up and I just take the one unit that's here, it comes out, and the other unit that's like around here or whatever, I pick it up, but then I drop it just here for the +1 to wound, right? And because I didn't do that, I didn't pick a line. I tried to go halvesies. I ended up losing really badly, and that's part of like one of the lessons where whenever I talk to different players, I always say is like you need to pick one of these lines. You cannot split. You have to pick a line, for better or for worse. And ultimately, like I don't really have a whole lot to say about this game, because I got blasted again. I lost 100 to 38 in Mark's favor. I scored like some secondary here. I got like some points here or there, but whatever. Um, yeah, I mean Mark played well. He correctly identified that Shalaxi was going to be a major problem for me, and I responded to it poorly and lost the game on turn 2. So for my last round of the event, one of the things that I know is true of the TO is, as long as you are not in like contention for the finals, or contention to actually win the event, he's really big on just allowing people to challenge in whatever round. And so one of the things that had happened at a previous event that I have talked about, at a previous GT at the same location is I was talking to one of my good friends, or one of the guys in my club, and I told him, "How does this list beat 18 Bulgrin? I don't think you can beat my list." And it messed with his head. It messed with his head really badly. And so every single time he saw me over the course of this weekend, he'd always go just like, "Josh, I don't think you can beat my list." Um, and so I was like, "Well, it is round 5, with the round that I thought was going to be the last round of the event." And he goes, and I tell the TO, I was like, "Hey, let me play against this guy. We're in the same win bracket. We're obviously not in contention to win the event at this point. Let me play against him. We got to make him put his money where his mouth is." And so for my last round, I ended up playing up against Victor and his Pact-Bound Zealots Chaos Space Marines. And this is a list very similar. If you guys, I don't know how much attention I want to draw to it, but I'll mention it anyway. On Tabletop Live, there was a game recently between Floof Cox and Jay Eggett. And if you watched my video on, what's it called, SoCal Open, the really big 8-man teams event that I went to a couple of months ago, this is a list very much inspired by the list that absolutely clapped me at that event. It is a Warpsmith, the only character in the entire list, and it's the Warlord because you just want one of them. One Cultist Mob, 1, 2, 3 and it's a Chaos Bikers, 2 Predator Destructors, 3 Vindicators, 1 Forge Fiend, 1 Hellbrute, which gives you the aura of both sustained and lethal, 1 Mauler Fiend, Beast of Nurgle, 1 unit of 6 Nurglings, 1 unit of Plague Bearers, and 1 Wardog Carnivore. And the whole premise of this list is Pact-Bound Zealots, you get access to crit 5s in general. So generally, like if you're going for a sustained, you can crit on 5s. But the really cool part of it is the Hellbrute here gives you, I think it's a 6-inch aura of you get both lethal and sustained on 5s because you get both parts of the Dark Pact. And when you do that for our Chaos Vindicators, where suddenly you're doing d6 plus 3 with hitting on 3s with sustained lethal 5s, it's really cool. It is an exceedingly violent list that is very hard to kill because it is almost all vehicles, right? You have a couple of Chaos Bikers, you have a Beast of Nurgle, some Nurglings, some Plague Bearers, right? You got some like little scoring pieces, but other than that, it is let's just check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It is just 9 vehicles. And no, none of them are like exceedingly difficult to kill, but Vindicators are T11 2 plus, like 11 wounds. Then you got some invuls in here. You got some like invulnerable saves. It's really a strong detachment. And the other major thing is you have the you give everything the Mark of Chaos for Nurgle so that you can give the reactive lone op strat. We end up playing this one on tipping point, linchpin, and prepared position. So you get free heroics and free go to grounds with battle line. And my expectation with this is that it was going to be a very close game one way or another. And I was generally going to be relying on using my lone operatives, Gaunt's Ghost, but mostly Sly Marbo to stand like here on the objective so that they can be relatively safe on this point in a position where my opponent's shooting is going to be very hard to bring to bear. My major game plan with this is I'm going to collapse one of his flanks so that he's no longer a threat to that. Ideally, I really want to collapse this flank for my opponent so that I can always safely stand on this objective with just putting like some Catachan or like a couple of Death Korps of Krieg on this point. And then from there, now I can redeploy most of my army in order to deal with his part of the board. One of the things that I kind of did as like a player, like reading the player more than reading the game, is I actually took my horses and I put them in strategic reserve because I did not think that Victor is generally not the player, or not a player who's quite as good at just going, just like jamming and saying deal with me. So I put the horses in reserve in order to try and deal with some of the threats later on by using them as a rapid ingress threat, and they ended up paying off. They ended up being okay with that in mind. So because we had expected that this was going to be the last round of the event, and we knew that at least I knew that there were some people there who ended up playing relatively slow games, I thought it was not going to be super important for us to play on a clock. And so we just kind of sat there and we bantered a fair amount early on into the game. And I'll go ahead and talk about the rest of the things that happened before we actually get towards the important parts of what happens later on. So at the very beginning, Victor goes ahead and deploys, a line of Nurglings, something like this, right? And I kind of expect that this is going to just like make a charge into all of my guys. But what ends up happening is Victor ends up drawing area denial, and they end up moving like over this way. There's a guy like here, and then he strings him out something like this, right? So that they are annoying to deal with, but also is going to be scoring him area denial. He did not think he had the tools to do a recover assets on turn 1, which I think was probably not true. One of the things that I think he was going to be very capable of doing is if he just like parks like a Vindicator here and like does another one with like a Vindicator here. Like I can't kill them. But he was really respecting a lot of my early game damage, which he probably didn't really need to. But what ends up happening on turn 2, or his turn 2, is probably like the single most interesting play that happens in. So on his turn 2, Victor, or on his turn 1, he had like his carnivore here, and I had my unit of scions like set up, something like this, such that they were very hard to shoot at, like down these angles, but where they could all see the one Nurgling that was here. And then I took another unit. I'll do this unit in purple. And then I had like the Death Korps of Krieg unit stretched out something like this, that kind of going into here, so that if he were to take any of his charges going this way, I could pull units in such, or pull models in such a way such that the carnivore is never going to get into my scions. And that was like a major part of this game, was always trying to make sure that my scions were going to be intact, because they were my only real way to deal with his army. But what Victor didn't necessarily understand was when I had like this unit of Krieg kind of spread out. But what Victor didn't understand is when I had like this unit of Krieg spread out something like this, and he brought his carnivore here and charged it in, he also had Mauler Fiend, or he had some unit here. I think it was a Mauler Fiend that he had put out relatively early on. And the major point was that, well, yes, these models need to pile in this way, or at least end up closer. A bunch of the models that were up here were actually closer to here. And because I am passing the check of I am engaged, my unit is engaged here, every model needs to go towards the closest enemy model, which allows me to go out this way. But I don't need to go into, or if I do a pile in such that I'm going closer, because I'm already hitting other checks of like being in engagement range, I don't necessarily need to bring the Mauler Fiend into the combat. And then the consolidation, again, because I'm passing the check of I am in engagement range, I can then like do this pile in and get guys on this point and then res guys as well, such that I end up scoring an extra primary, right? I end up scoring 2 no man's land and my home of primary on turn 2, and I'd expected to only score an 8. And that was a 5-point swing in the game that I don't think he was really expecting to see happen. I had also like rapid ingressed a bunch of horses over here such that they were not possible to be shot, and then they were able to clean up this carnivore almost immediately afterwards. Other than that, the game kind of goes as you would expect. He puts out some vehicles, I try and shoot them, or I try and make sure that Victor's like not scoring more than just. I'm trying to make sure that Victor's not scoring more than just his home and his natural, and so that nobody's like scoring the middle of the board. And then we learn during the top of 4 that round 5 was not going to be the last round of the tournament. We were going to be playing a 6th round. And at this point, I was pretty confident that I still was going to win the game. I was still confident that I was going to win by a couple of points as long as I'm drawing reasonably well. And but it's the kind of thing where we need to see what kind of cards I draw. We need to see what kind of damage rolls I can actually do. And we end up finding a position where we're saying, I don't think, or like if we only talk out round 4 and we don't get to round 5, Victor wins. But Victor's also really hard on himself, like as a player, and he just thinks, I don't want to win like that. And I respect that. Like I get it. I also told him many times, like, dude, like I didn't hear the TO call it either. Like it's also on me for not speeding up the game because I wasn't listening to the TO talk either. So like take your win if you want it. Like if and so I told him like take the win, dude. Like it's totally fine. It's not your fault that I also was not paying attention. But at that point, like the TO comes over, we submit a score, where it's only like round 4. But then Victor, you could tell like he's really just like torn up, and because like it brought my energy down too. It's like I don't think I'm gonna play the 6th round, but Victor is still just like, what do we do? Luckily, potentially luckily, we had not moved any of the models. Like the board was still in the exact same game state, and so I suggest to Victor, like, hey, because we disagree on how the rest of this game is supposed to play out, why don't we just play it out? We haven't touched the board. It is still in the same game state. And so we end up reversing a little bit because we had like kind of talked out things. And in the top of 4, we revert to like the end of Victor's turn 4. We go into the bottom of 4, which is my turn. And we end up playing out the rest of the game from that position. And I end up drawing a couple of pretty decent secondaries. And we end up going into the bottom or the top of 5, where Victor scores a 13 on his primary by holding the middle, this one, and this one, and he draws his 2 secondaries of Overwhelming Force and Established Locus, and he easily had like I have like one dude that he can see, so he easily kills this one for Overwhelming Force, but Established Locus he can do for 2 points. It's relatively easy for him to do for 2 points. However, the game was close enough that if he took that, I could win if I scored 15 on primary and then scored like 8 on secondary, which was very reasonable considering what cards I still had left in the deck. So he decided to gamble and redraw Established Locus, which he could only do for 2, and he ended up drawing Engage in All Fronts, which he couldn't do. Or at least he couldn't both do Engage in All Fronts and do the Overwhelming Force. So he ends up drawing, or he takes the guaranteed 2 points, discards it, and ended up scoring none. So he ends up scoring 13 on primary and 3 on secondary. So in my bottom of 5, I'm looking at a 21-point deficit. Victor has an end score of 83 points. I know it is trivial for me to score my home and also this in order to score a 13. So I need 21. I have 13 for sure. So realistically, I need to find 8 points, 8 points more in order to actually win the game. Now my options are, I have a big unit of Scions here. I had another unit of Scions here that I had picked up, so they're no longer here. These are up in the sky. I have just Gaunt. That's just Gaunt. That I have that can run around and potentially do secondaries or shoot at different things. I have a Death Korps Marshal here, and then a unit of Mortars that are tied up with his Vindicator on this point. I end up drawing Assassination and Cleanse. And because the Warpsmith was still alive, he had his Warpsmith, which is on that weird Oa base, hiding here. It was protected by a Beast of Nurgle and a Predator Destructor, which was here, which had gone for like a 9-inch charge over this direction. Basically, I had no room in here to 6-inch Deep Strike. And he has a reactive Lone Up stratagem on the Warpsmith, because it is Mark of Nurgle. Now, I had one line that could win me the game. What this line involved was I had a Death Korps Marshal over here. It was going to cleanse. So that was going to score me 2, meaning that I still needed 6 points left to find. The other part of the line was this Death Korps Marshal moves here, does a cleanse, and then I take these Mortars and put at least one of them on here. He had a Predator Destructor that was here that was going to that could Overwatch. Depending on whether or not Victor overwatches here, and if the Death Korps Marshal dies, game's over. I can't win. So he takes the Overwatch, and Death Korps Marshal lives, and I take my Mortars. I say they fail all but one. They fail both the Desperate Escapes. Doesn't matter. One of them lives because, didn't need to make a Desperate Escape. Ends up on the point. So I found another 2. Which means that I still need to find 4 points. However, in so doing this, Victor has run out of CP. Now, I need to score Assassination. And I had 2 ways to do this. The first one, and I hadn't realized this entire line at the time. The first one is this unit gets an advance with the reroll, and I have 1 CP to go for advance and shoot. And because Creed is somewhere in here on this point, they will definitely be within 12 inches, so I can re-roll the advance. I do this first to make sure that Victor does not have the information on whether or not I will be able to get the advance in. And because he takes that line, or If these guys come in, they will definitely be. If I get a good advance, if I roll like a 5 or 6, they will definitely be in a position where they can shoot that guy and kill him off of the assault strat, which would be 5 points. Which would be 5 points in order to actually score assassination, which would give me a 1 point win. However, as soon as Victor uses the Overwatch and has his last CP, it opens up another line for me because I no longer need to come over here. What I can do is I can drop the unit of Scions that was over here, and I can drop them over in this corner, and because he can no longer reactive loan up, I can shoot the Warpsmith. And so that's what I do. I drop them, we roll out the plasma shots, I score 7 hits on 6 dice because some of them had already died from hazardous, and we get him. And the Warpsmith dies. I find my 5 points, and I win this game 84 to 83. And honestly, at this point, Victor, love the guy. He's a great guy. He goes, as soon as we get the end result, he goes, I want to resubmit the score with this score. I told him, sure. I mean, whatever you think is going to be better for you. I'm not pressed on whether I officially win or lose this game. I'm not pressed on the score, but I really appreciate that. I think I like how committed Victor is to doing what he thinks is right, and doing what he thinks is the correct thing overall. And ultimately, we end up reversing the score. We reversed the result to an 84 to 83 for me instead of what was it? It was like I want to say like 53 to 55 or something, in Victor's favor, which was the initially reported score. But we ended up changing it 84 to 83. Great game, really fun up against Victor. It ended up being even closer than I thought. And if he had just taken the 2 points on Established Locus, based on the cards I drew, I would not have been able to win. So, very, very close game. Really, really fun coming through. And, yeah, good stuff. That was my last game. Like I said, I did not do the 6th round because I was tired. I had a really big energy drop after round 5, especially because we kind of found out like towards the end of the game. It's like, hey, you guys need to finish up. I called dice down, and we were like, what? Why aren't? Isn't this the last game? Like people are still playing, and it's like, nope, we gotta finish up. We're gonna play one more round. Um. So yeah, I think overall, what do I want to say about this event? I had a good time. I did. I didn't prep very well for this event, and I was a little bit disappointed in myself for like I wanted to play this bridgehead detachment. I wanted to play this archetype of list. I don't think I'm gonna do it again. One, this list is exhausting to play. For multiple games in a day. I remember talking to Nemo about it. He was like, "Yeah, playing like 8 games in a row at WCW, playing even just like 8 games at a GT over the course of like 3 days, it's just exhausting. It just takes so much out of you. And as much as as much fun as I have playing the list when I don't have that time crunch on me, doing it at a tournament where the time crunch is there is something that I probably would not do again. Also, it shows that I need to spend more time like playing the matchups I think are bad, and the matchups that this list has that are bad are armies that just run at you, especially if they have 4-up invuls, because it kills the consistency of how much damage you do. Like, Scions do so much consistent damage into anything that does not have a 4-up invul because they're just passing it. Like, you know, here's 18 5-up saves for 2 damage apiece. Oh, you died? Like, everything in the, everything will die? Great, cool. You didn't have an invul? Awesome. But not really putting time into like playing the matchups that I knew were bad for this army really ended up hurting me quite a bit. Yeah, I think that's the biggest like takeaway for me. I'm really looking forward to playing a lot of the new codex stuff. I'm really looking forward to playing like mechanized. I'm gonna put some time into the siege regiment. I'm gonna take some time to play I don't know if like how much time I'm going to put in combined right away. I'll be playing the new Bridgehead as well. Like there's a lot of cool stuff coming out in the codex. And so it's kind of interesting to me, like looking at the matchups that I knew this was going to struggle with and just knowing it's like, well, I'm not going to play this archetype again for a long time. So, maybe I'll figure it out. Maybe I won't. Either way, it's a lot of fun. But yeah, like I said, this is the last GT I'm going to play on the Index. So hopefully this was useful to you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this storytelling time. And we'll see you guys all for the next video sometime in the next week or so. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.